Season 2, Episode 12 of A View from the Left Side focuses on the Arizona primaries, which are coming up soon. There are many exciting races on both sides of the aisle. Many people are termed out. Other people are running for other offices. There were 8 new appointees in January 22. They all face challenges in the primary or the general. It is a big election for Arizona this year. There are so many open seats in the legislature and so many challenges that this will be a huge turnover year for the Arizona legislature, in my opinion. One thing's for sure, we won't know how it goes until November. It'll be a different group on Inauguration Day, January 2023. It's up to the voters whether it's a better group than we had in the 55th legislature or worse. Joining me today for this podcast are 3 long-term colleagues of mine at Blog for Arizona, Michael Bryan, Larry Bodine, and David Gordon. Mike is the founder and managing editor of Blog for Arizona. He is a local attorney and served as prosecutor for the City of Tucson. Larry has been a writer and editor at Blog for Arizona for many years. Larry's also an attorney by profession and a former newspaper reporter. David is a prolific blogger who has interviewed many Democratic candidates for Blog for Arizona and is very knowledgeable about politics in Maricopa County. He's also an accomplished science fiction author. We're going to touch on the legislative races first today, since there could be many changes on both sides of the aisle, thanks to redistricting, term limits, deaths, and resignations to run for higher office. We're also going to cover the statewide offices, since Arizona will be electing a new governor this year and others in the executive branch. And there's a lot of competition for the statewide races as well as the legislative races. We'll also close with some comments on the congressional races and other races as we have time. What do you think are the hot races in the legislature this year? Larry, I hear that you have some background and some data regarding the legislative races. Why don't you start?
Yeah, this has been one of the worst legislative sessions in history for Arizonans. Governor Ducey signed a $500,000 law to secure the border and build the wall. The Republicans enacted a controversial new proof of citizenship requirement to vote in federal elections. They want to outlaw gender-affirming care for transgender youths. They voted measures to make it to suppress the vote, make it more difficult to vote. And then, of course, they passed this bill to kill public education by creating the universal voucher law. So I think those are the issues that we're going to have to measure candidates by, where they stand on those issues.
Well, that's for sure. And there's a lot of variety in those candidates. Do you want to talk a little bit about some of the races in Maricopa County, David?
Yes, thank you, Pamela. The hot races in Maricopa County, there's LD2, that's Janine Castine and Judy Schweibert. There's LD4, that is Christine Marsh and Laura Teresh. Christine used to be in LD28, but through redistricting is now LD4. LD5 is going to be an interesting contest because you have several Democrats in that race, both incumbent and challengers, going for the 2 House seats. The other seats that to watch out for, LD9, that's a new district, leans very Democratic in, I would say, Eastern Tempe, Western Chandler. LD12, that's probably safely Democratic. That's where Mitzi Epstein's running for state senate, although there were several Democrats running for the House race there. LD13, where you have Jennifer Pollock running a new House seat in the old LD17, and a very good educator, Cindy Hans, running for the state senate seat. And then there's LD14. There are a couple of interesting candidates there in Maricopa County that are very well qualified, very pro-education. So those are probably the races I'd be looking out for as we approach the primary and the general election.
I think it's kind of funny that there are so many people trying to come for a comeback, like Catherine Miranda and Anthony Kern and others. So I think that's going to be fun. Ken Bennett also is trying to come for a comeback to the legislature. So lots of interesting stuff. What do you think, Mike?
Well, I think some of the most interesting races are those in the Republican primaries, especially those that kind of pit the traditional Republican Party and those who have kind of stepped away from Trump against those who are like dyed-in-the-wool Trumpists. I mean, one obvious example is like where you have Wendy Rogers and Townsend going at it. It's kind of a weird race because all the Trumpist support is behind Rogers. She's got Trump's own endorsement. She's got Arpaio, Lake, Lindell, Gosar, Navarro. It just goes on. All these crazies on the right. But Townsend has been right there for Trump. I mean, she's been an election denier as long as there's been election deniers. So it's a really kind of odd one. And I expect to see Rogers to win with, she's got, I don't know, ungodly amounts of money behind her, like $2 million. But then there's LD10 in the Senate, which is, I think, a real bellwether where Rusty Bowers, who was just recently censured by his own party for basically testifying truthfully in front of the January 6th committee, is facing Farnsworth, who is apparently on a mission from God, according to his own life, but is also endorsed by Trump. So you're seeing this civil war up and down the ticket. I mean, all the way down into these LD races, Trump is getting involved in Arizona politics. But also with the upper races in the Senate, the legislature, the House, the congressional races, and the statewide races. So we can talk about those in a few minutes, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, some of those races are really interesting. Like, for example, like in LD1 in the House, there's 7 people running. There's 5 Republicans and 2 Democrats, including Wen and Burgess, who are the 2 incumbents. And then I think that Bowers race is going to be really interesting, Bowers and David Farnsworth. David Farnsworth, I met with him years ago about public banking. He didn't used to be quite so extreme as he is now. So that one will be interesting. There's another Bowers running in LD6. I assume that's a family member in the House, and Maria Sims is another one running in there, and she's also another comeback kid or trying to be a comeback kid. So one thing for sure, in the legislature, it's going to be different because there's so many different seats. What do you think about some of the races down here in Tucson? Obviously, I think the one that's the most competitive is the one where at least some of us live, and that's LD18, because we have Senator Steele, Randy Freese, and I all moving on with our lives from the legislature. So that's got a lot of money and a lot of interest.
Yeah, LD18 is great, and it's a really great thing for Democratic voters. I mean, they've all been very cordial to each other. There's been a few sharp elbows thrown about some backgrounds of some of the candidates, but we have 7 great candidates for 3 seats in LD18, and I think we're going to be well served regardless of how the voters choose. The 5 who are running for the House, all well qualified, all great Dems. The 2 that are running for the Senate, also well qualified, great Dems. Well, it's one of those very positive races. It's a really good way to get an idea of how the Democrats are going to frame themselves for the next coming elections.
I like it that they've been cordial, and I know that in the old LD9, when we always had challengers, Freeze and I always had challengers, and the races were on the up and up, and everybody, debated the issues, but nobody got weird or nasty. So I like it when the Democrats compete on a sort of a higher plane and don't get down into the dirt with each other.
Yeah, we have a cornucopia of Democratic candidates here in LD18. We have 2 school teachers running for House, Nathan Davis and Nancy Gutierrez. We have Chris Mathis also running. He's a law professor. Kat Stratford, who is a disability rights candidate, and Charlie Verdon, who is, I guess, a family values candidate. He always appears with pictures of his child, his baby.
And he's a small business owner, too.
Yeah. And then in the Senate race, we got Morgan Abraham, who is a real fighter. He's a veteran, and he's been appointed to occupy the seat in LD9 at the moment. And then Priya Sundarshan, who is another law professor, all very bright. All these people have their hearts in the right place. They're very articulate, and I can't wait to see who's going to win.
Yeah. That'll be a good race. And like you said, in LD18, which is mostly the old LD9, we have a plethora of good people running. I was looking at some of the campaign finance records First of all, they're a little bit hard to read for the legislature because you have to look at the new LD number and the old LD number sometimes. And I noticed that David Cook up in Pinal County is the legislator with the highest number of independent expenditures in his favor than any other legislator, at least currently in July 2022. And he is running against John Fillmore and Brenda Barton. So it's three incumbents running against each other for those two seats in the House. I think there's at least one Democrat running in the general. And so that one would be interesting. Cook has been a pivotal person in the House because he's not quite as crazy as some of the others, and he's somebody that we can talk to. And so it's going to be interesting on that one. I would guess that one of the other two will go down, Fillmore or Barton. Barton also is pretty reasonable, She's like me. She's a woman of a certain age, and every once in a while she'll say, well, I don't think that makes sense. And it's like, yes, somebody's fighting for common sense, yay! So there's that. And Cook also will bring up common sense and rural issues and things like that. So are there others that you think are interesting? There's that one district which is part of the old LT10 that goes up over the Catalinas, and I think it's going to be fun, at least for the short term, to watch Senator Vince Leach have some competition with Justine Wadsack and the other competitor up there. What do you guys think about that?
Really interesting race of candidates opposing Leach Wadsack in LD 17. We've got Mike Nickerson, who is a pastor who just has all sorts of fabulous empathy. We've got Dana Almond. She is also running. She's African American and she's a veteran. And I'm blanking on the name of the third guy, but he's a community organizer. So, we have, once again, a cornucopia of excellent candidates on the Democratic side.
So there are no incumbents in LD 17 on the Democratic side. Really, the only incumbent would be Leach, right?
Well, and Leach is only an incumbent because he pressured the redistricting committee to extend, do a little tiny gerrymander so that his own personal house would be in the district. And, he succeeded with that, and it just illustrates the corruption of all the Republicans.
Unfortunately, there's quite a few Republicans who are running unopposed for the legislature. I did see a few write-ins, and so it looks like there's some sort of opposition on some of them, but I'm sorry that people like Gowan and Peterson and some of these others, and even Steve Kaiser, have no opposition in the Senate.
And I think it's important to point out is that before Roe v. Wade was overturned by the Supreme Court in Dobbs, apparently the state committee here, the Democratic State Committee here in Arizona, made a decision to single shot several of our more competitive districts, including 2, 4, 10, 13, 16, that potentially we could have won 2 seats in the House, but they're only running single shot candidates. So due to that decision, the best we can hope for, even if we have a really great year, is parity in the House. We don't have the opportunity or possibility of actually taking the majority. So the best we can hope for is a power sharing arrangement in the House, taking the Senate and taking the statewide offices. But that decision was made, and it was a bad one in my view. I think we should have given the voters a choice to give us the majority this year, and I guess the state committee felt otherwise. They felt that the best thing we could hope for was to hold on to the minority that we have and not necessarily grow it at all. So I think that was a tragic mistake and kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Short-sighted, given that the opportunity to strike down Roe was in front of the Supreme Court. They should have known better that we had an actual opportunity to turn the state blue, but they turned it down.
I'd like to go along with Michael there. I remember 4 years ago when I first started with the blog, and I went to the first Maricopa County Summer Convention, and they were priding themselves that they had a candidate in every LD. You don't have that this session. I don't know if it was this party decision or the county party decision. County party wants to focus more, at least in Maricopa, and we'll maybe talk about this later. School board elections, which are important, and the special election for Maricopa County attorney. But I agree. They should have fielded candidates in every LD. I mean, yes, it would have been an uphill battle, but at least it would have been a battle.
Yeah, there's no candidate at all in the House for the Democrats in districts 3, 7, 15, or 25. I mean, they're not favorable districts by any means. but not even running a candidate in those districts seems defeatist.
Yeah, it's better to get the messages out and at least expose them for who they are, than to not have any messaging against them. One of the things that we are seeing this year is a lot of spending by the political action committees and then the independent expenditures for some of these candidates. I think we can segue a little bit into what's going on with some of the statewide candidates with some campaign finance talk, because there's an enormous amount of money in these races this year, or at least in some of the races. When I was looking at the reports yesterday, a lot of the candidates have a modest amount of money. And it's always the case, at least with the legislature, that some people win with a few $100s because it's such a safe district, and others have, hundreds of thousands of dollars that they raise in order to try to get a job that pays $24,000 a year. We see the Chamber of Commerce playing real big, Americans for Prosperity, Our Voice, Our Vote on the left. So there's a lot of different big groups in there. It was surprising to see, well, not surprising, but Karen Robeson was the top IE person when I looked at it yesterday with $2.3 million. But second was Reginald Bodine, who's running for Secretary of State as a Democrat with $1.8 million in independent expenditures supporting him. And then it goes down dramatically to Carrie Lake, who's the person that everybody's talking about and who's the Trump person. So it's pretty wild out there. What do you guys have to say about either campaign finance or about the state races or the milieu of what's going on? Larry, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I'm very optimistic about Democratic fundraising with the reversal of Roe v. Wade and some of the voter suppression laws that are being passed. There's a huge growth, massive growth in Democratic fundraising. I know this is the U.S. Senate, but NBC News reported that the top 5 U.S. Senate candidates that are Democrats have many times the money raised that their Republican opponents do. Like Mark Kelly, he has $13.6 million. Ralph Warnock in Georgia has $17 million. And the best indicator of all is that Act Blue contributions in January were 51 million, but in June it grew to 65 million. So I think people are making significant donations to the Democratic Party.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things, one of the interesting races is the Secretary of State race that you mentioned between Adrian Fontes and Reginald Bodine. Bodine, he might have stepped in some trouble with coordination with his IE, because he started one of the IEs that's actually supporting him, and he controls it. He has a firewall agreement that isn't, I suppose, worth the paper it's written on. Maybe it's worth the paper it's written on. I don't know, but the paper's not worth much. Let's put it that way. And Fontes is hammering him over it, and he's going to keep hammering him until the primary. So that could actually come back and bite Bodine. I don't know how many people are really interested in making their vote on that issue, but it is, when you're a Democrat, the ethics of campaign financing and financing your campaign become a bit more salient to people, I think.
Well, I know that Bodine has not been a supporter of the outlaw dirty money initiatives that have come out. And it's obvious why, because he's got $1.8 million backing his candidacy. The other thing that's really fascinating on the Secretary of State's race is the Republican side. Again, with campaign finance, I saw that Mark Fincham has the distinction of being the person with the most IEs against him for his Secretary of State race. And we'll remind listeners that Mark Fincham was there on January 6th, 2021 at the Capitol. There's a lot of money being spent against him. There's also Shauna Bullock and Michelle Ugenti Rita running on the Republican side. I am really hoping for Bodine or Fontes. The alternatives on the right are really, really bad. Mike, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I think you have to sort of put the Secretary of State's race in context with all the other statewide races. I mean, the Senate race, obviously between Kelly and whoever wins that primary, the governor's race, the Attorney General's race, the Secretary of State's race. All those are indicative of a war, a civil war within the GOP. Because right now they're going at each other like cats and dogs, and it's really the Trumpists versus the traditionalists. You're seeing endorsements and money coming in from traditional Republicans who are sick and fed up with this 2020 election was stolen kind of thing, and with Trump in general. And so you're seeing this lineup with traditionalists who are getting the backing of people like Ducey, like Pence, like Brnovich for Senate has implicitly, he hasn't come out and explicitly endorsed him, but clearly Brnovich is his favorite in the Senate race. In the governor's race, you have an explicit endorsement of Taylor Robeson by Ducey, and in the also by Pence, I believe he's also endorsed Taylor Robeson. He did a rally for her, which she apparently took a plane from Glendale to Scottsdale, like a 10-minute flight or something to get to the rally. So she's taking some flack about that and is denying it, of course.
So much for fiscal conservatism.
Yeah. And then there's the Attorney General's race, where I would say probably Gould is kind of the traditionalist favorite, although Cooper and Grove are still in there. There's been no explicit endorsement yet. But of course, Abe Hameda has been endorsed by Trump, and that in itself is just one of the best stories of the season. I swear to God. Apparently, Abe Hameda had his family loan him $1 million so that he could show it on his books when he went to talk to Trump to try and get his endorsement. And so he's like, yeah, we got this $1 million+ in the bank. We're ready to go. We're good. And then he paid back the loan like a few days after the meeting. He completely bamboozled Trump. He grifted the grifter to get his endorsement. It's the greatest story in Arizona politics today, I swear. And then in the Secretary of State's race, it's lining up to be Bo Lane. Bo Lane is the sort of traditionalist establishment candidate who's endorsed by Governor Ducey and others in the traditionalist wing of the party. And of course, the Trumpists are lining up behind Mark Finchem. So, you have this battle up and down the top of the ticket and even reaching down into the LDs between the Trumpists and the traditionalists. So it's going to be really fascinating to see how that shakes out on August 2nd.
The three most important races in the state level, and that is governor, attorney general, and secretary of state. We need to elect Katie Hobbs. She has basically said that she is going to set a record for vetoes of all the bad legislation coming out of the legislature. Chris Mays is, I think, unopposed in the Democratic side. She says she's not going to prosecute anybody for having an abortion. And then in the Secretary of State, we have two fireball candidates, Adrian Fontes, the Maricopa County Recorder formerly, and Reginald Bolding, the minority leader in the state Senate. Either one of them would be fabulous secretaries of state, and anything we can do to keep out Mark Finchem, who is going to turn our election system back into the Stone Age, is a good move.
Also, there's Kathy Hoffman against Tom Horn.
Well, if he wins the primary, he's got a couple of competitors like Udall and Sapphire, and Hoffman would be very fortunate if she drew either Horn or Sapir. Udall would probably be more formidable, but I think her and the other statewide candidates, it's their races to lose. I think Democrats statewide, including Senator Kelly, I think they're all going to do very well. That's my opinion. Because of who they're running against. Even the traditionalists will vote for the same things the Trump-less ones will do. The key races will be in the lower ones where the districts have been drawn. But I think Democrats in the statewide races will do fairly well in November.
Generally speaking, I think if the traditionalist side of the party wins, they have a better chance of holding on to those offices than if the really radical Trumpists win. Because, while some of the Trump voters may be, turned off if the traditionalist wins, they're still going to probably vote Republican. Whereas if the Trumpist wins, they could really turn off a lot of the moderates. So a lot of the moderates may just, skip the top of the ticket and vote further down.
Yeah, it'll be fascinating how that plays out because there's so much competition. We saw in the legislature last year and this year in particular, the rift in the Republican Party, and it went all the way down to the budget. We passed a bipartisan budget for the first time in years because that group of libertarians voted no on every part of the budget. It was very unusual to have Travis Grantham, the Speaker pro tem, a Republican, vote no on every part of a Republican budget. So they are torn apart. I mean, they often try to peddle a story about the Democrats being in disarray, and we are always a herd of cats. We just get, that's a given, right? But, they are really at war with each other.
In the governor race, where the governor candidates, had a debate on Newsmax, and they all stood up and insulted each other, called each other names. They're at each other's throats. And the same thing is going on between Karen Robson and Kerry Lake for governor. They're just trying to find the nastiest words they can find out about each other. And it's a reflection of just the dissolution of the Republican Party in this state.
Well, the nastiest primary, I think, and probably the loudest, is the primary between the GOP candidates for Senate that are looking to take out Mark Kelly. Masters and Lamone are going at each other hammer and tongue. Obviously, Masters came out on top in terms of the race for the Trump endorsement. He got it. Lamone did not. My personal opinion as to why that happened is because Trump took one look at Lamone and he didn't see a toady who was willing to drop in line with his program. He saw a rival, a guy who's actually a legitimate self-made millionaire. Scared the hell out of Trump. He didn't like it at all, so he decided to go with Masters. But they are killing each other in ads. I mean, he's getting hammered as China's candidate. Masters is getting hammered as Peter Thiel's California tech billionaire candidate. They're just destroying each other, and if either one of them advances to the general election, they're toast. So Trumpists hate him. He can't prosecute cases that he can't make, that have no factual basis, and they resent the hell out of him for that. And so they're not going to vote for him. If Brnovich is the candidate, they're not going to vote on that line. And if Masters or Lamone is the candidate, they're going to turn off a lot of people because there's been so much negative advertising on him, and frankly, neither one of them was really an Arizonan.
Brnovich, he's got that hard line on abortion now. I guess he's doing that to try to make himself a little bit more radical right to compete with those other two. I don't see how that is a selling point at all.
It turns off the suburbs in the general election.
Yeah. Brnovich is a complete boob. He filmed himself on the top of the state capitol building flipping nunchucks around. And, so that's his nickname now is, Mark Nunchucks Brnovich. And, in terms of being an effective attorney general, he is one of the worst. He has squandered multiple millions of dollars attacking windmills and, national issues in which he has no authority at all. I mean, he's one of the worst lawyers I've seen in elected office.
Yeah, I got a different opinion there. I think Brnovich has been extremely effective as Attorney General in terms of, championing the right wing and being a thorn in the side of the Biden administration. He's actually been very effective, and so it's kind of surprising how much the extreme right of the party hates him, considering how effective he's actually been in that office. But if any of them are weak candidates, and that's not to say they couldn't win. They certainly can, because there's going to be so much money in this race, so much money, including independent expenditures and the candidate spending itself. I expect we'll probably be seeing the first $250 million Senate race in Arizona this year.
That's pretty disgusting, but yeah, I think you're right. So what about the congressional races? We have CD6 down here. We have Kirsten Engel running against Daniel Hernandez, and then we have, I think, at least 3 Republicans who are also running for CD6. This would be Ann Kirkpatrick's old seat, or what's left after the redistricting.
What really struck me is a couple of days ago, Ann Kirkpatrick came out and she endorsed Kirsten Engel for her old seat, or, like you said, what's left of it. So that's a really strong endorsement. I think Hernandez has a lot more support in the business community. He's doing a lot of there'll be a lot of IEs behind him based on that. But I expect, based on the endorsements, that Engel is looking in good shape to take the nomination in that district. And of course, Juan Ciscomani is the presumptive nominee. I mean, there are other candidates, but none of them are a real factor. Juan Ciscomani's been groomed from the beginning to be the candidate in this new district. It was basically created for him. So, I expect to see that matchup, Ciscomani versus Engel.
Well, the beauty of it is Juan Ciscomani is a total empty suit. He has no elected experience, no community involvement experience. He's just some guy who has a nice smile and he wears a suit, but that's about it. The other candidates are repeat stumblebums like Brandon Martin, whose claim to fame is that he interrogated prisoners in Afghanistan. Really scary guy, but also really ineffective. So I think they're going to see through Juan Ciscomani because there's nothing there.
I hope you're right about that, but he does have a Hispanic last name and lots of money behind him. He's going to have plenty of money going into the general election. And I'll remind you, they do have a couple of percentage edge now in CD6, whereas in the old CD2, we had a slight edge. So it's going to be a rough race, regardless of who's the nominees.
It all comes down to the independents. Does anyone know who did Giffords endorse any of the two candidates?
He is not.
Okay.
It's certainly implied by the Hernandez campaign as often as he uses her and Obama in his ads. I think that's one of the big complaints I've heard about Hernandez's campaign is that he sort of implies thereby that Obama and or Giffords have endorsed him and they have not.
One of the statewide offices we forgot was treasurer. And so there's a few people running on the Republican side, and then on the Democratic side, we have Martin Quesada. I have served on the Commerce Committee with Jeff Wenninger, who's one of the Republican candidates for treasurer, and I got a kick out of his no woke investments on his sign. I've been making fun of some of those Republican signs on social media. So I wanted to ask him, I didn't get a chance during the session, what is a woke investment, And wouldn't people in Tucson actually want some woke investments like in solar panels or something?
I'm not sure what woke investments means, but I think it has a lot to do with the anti-BDS movement and disinvesting from fossil fuels. And those are the main things is, support for Israel and support for fossil fuels, I think is really the key thing. But there's a reason why people don't pay that much attention to the treasurer position because, it's not got a lot of power. I mean, it's not a powerful position or really a position from which you launch a further political campaign.
Oh, Ducey did.
Yeah, Ducey did.
That's true. He's the exception to the rule. Yeah.
So are there other races you guys want to comment on?
The two congressional races in Maricopa County that could get David Schweikert's seat. You have Jeff and Hodge and Adam Metzendorf duking it out for the nomination there. Hodge has the endorsements. He also has a powerful presence. All of you, I think, have met him. He owns the room when he's there. Metzendorf, he's good too, but they would both be good, solid nominees. Whoever wins on the second, the one and Larry and Michael know about this one is Andy Biggs' seat that he's running for. You have Javier Ramos running on the Democratic side, and you have Clint Smith, an attorney. I have to be honest, he was my attorney one time when I had my school. He's running an independent campaign, and he is getting support from centrist Democrats who think Ramos can't carry it in that district now that it's more Republican. And honestly, they may be right.
They're absolutely right.
Yeah. Well,
I share that opinion.
Well, I understand, Mike. I want to boo maybe because I don't like to speak in absolutes. But yeah. But no, I mean, Clint Smith, he has the type of personality and the temperament. To be real here, I mean, he could appeal to. He is the perfect centrist middle candidate. I mean, he's more right of center, but he would make Democrats comfortable to vote for him. Let's put it that way.
Well, here's the thing. You remember when Russell Pierce sort of went off the deep end?
Oh, yeah.
Sort of embarrassed the LDS. And, Wilbur Smith, I think his name was, came in and defeated him as an independent campaign. And so,
I thought it was Jerry Lewis.
Jerry Lewis, sorry, thank you, yes.
Yes.
So that's the exact same people that are running Clint against Biggs, because Biggs is also an LDS member, so is Clint, and they're fed up with Biggs. He's an embarrassment to them. He's a traitor. He's a legit traitor. I mean, he was one of the guys who organized the whole coup attempt on January 6th, and so they want him out. And Clint Smith is the stalking horse that they have in the race to do it. And if Democrats are smart, we'll get the hell out of that race, get behind Clint Smith, and take out this cancer named Andy Biggs out of Arizona politics. This guy needs to go. And Clint Smith is the way to do it. Yeah, I don't agree with everything Clint Smith says, but he is a reasonable person.
Right.
And that's what we need, is a reasonable person. Javier Ramos's campaign is just I don't know, it's tilting at windmills. You know, there's no way that a Democrat is going to do the job in that district, and him being in the race will encourage a lot of Democrats to vote for him instead of Clint Smith, and so he could be a spoiler. I mean, if you remember back in the Pierce days, he tried to recruit a fake Democrat to do the exact same job that Javier Ramos is doing in this race now. So he needs to get out.
Well, it could also be who knows? You guys remember Lieberman Lamont in 2006? Lieberman ran as an independent, and the Democrats still voted for Lieberman instead of Lamont, and he could take that Senate. It could go either way. We'll see. But
I'll tell you one race I care a lot about, and that's for Arizona Corporation Commission. Not a very sexy office, but it makes all the difference in how much we pay for utilities and whether we have any renewable energy standards. The Republican majority on the Corporation Commission decided to do away with any renewable energy standards. You know, they're happy if we're burning oil, until the earth catches fire. And fortunately, the Republicans running are pretty much no names. I just checked and I haven't heard anything about any of them, but the Democrats have two excellent candidates, including incumbent Sandra Kennedy, who has made her name as a consumer advocate, and then Lauren Kuby, who is another green energy advocate. I think the two of them have a pretty good chance. They've been campaigning together, and they make a really good argument.
Lauren Kuby and Sandra Kennedy are both exceptional. Although Lauren Kuby's been more visible lately, for some reason Sandra Kennedy's, I think she's going more on. She's hoping on incumbency a little bit. She hasn't been out in front like Kuby has. But Kuby, she was a former vice mayor at Tempe. She's working the state in a lot of ways. She's working the state like Kathy Hoffman did 4 years ago. She's not leaving any pebble unturned in the state, and they're both very good candidates.
Yeah, they're working hard, but a lot of it is going to be dependent on excitement up and down the ballot. If Mark Kelly's heading the ticket, there's going to be a lot of people who are just going to vote Democrat all the way down. If they're independent and they decide to go with Kelly, they might very well go ahead and go Democrat all the way down the ticket, and that would help all of our candidates, lift all votes. And one critical decision that's going to be made between now and the general election is Trump's decision as to whether he's going to announce for presidency in 2024. If he does that before the midterm, we could see a real big bounce in independents and Democrats turning out to make sure that he doesn't get a Republican governorship or a Republican senator in Arizona. So that would be a big turning point for this race if Trump decides to jump in for 24.
But Mike, he's been teasing that for months now. And there's a lawsuit against him that he's violating federal election rules by talking about running for president without actually, filing to do so. The beauty of Trump is every time he speaks, he creates another Democratic activist. Trump is incredibly unpopular. I mean, we threw him out of office, 2 years ago by 7 million votes. That's not a close vote. And I think his support has even dwindled thanks to the January 6th hearings, pointing out that he was the architect and the planner and the advocate for the January 6th election. Do you want to vote for a president who tried to overthrow the government to stay in office? So if Trump announces before the elections, that's the best news the Democrats could hope for.
I agree.
But the other thing to keep in mind, guys, is remember, you were talking about Mark Kelly, Mike. What I worry about from 2020 Democrats voted for Kelly, they voted for Biden, they voted for the congressional candidates, mostly. But then the county, the LDs, the school boards, a lot of people, they need to become familiar, they need to become educated and realize every seat from dog catcher to senator is important.
Bottom of the ballot up.
Oh yeah, from the bottom ballot up, and especially school board where there's an undeclared war on public education being fought out by Republican candidates there. I've interviewed many school board candidates. A lot of them are trained by Maricopa County, even though in a nonpartisan way. But school boards are where the war for public education is being fought right now. But voters need to understand it's not just Mark Kelly, it's not just your congressional candidate, it's not just Katie Hobbs or Kathy Hoffman or any other statewide candidates. It's it is like either Priya or who's the other, or Morgan. It's Nancy Gutierrez. It's either Consuelo Hernandez or Stephanie Stahl Hamilton. These races are important.
Absolutely. Yeah, in fact, there is one sub-state level race that I think is incredibly important, and that's the Maricopa County Attorney's race. We have Julie Gunnigal running for that race. That affects 4 million people. There are 4 million people in Maricopa County, and she is the candidate that has vowed she is not going to be prosecuting any women for their reproductive choices, whereas the Republican candidate, just the opposite. She's looking very much forward to enforcing territorial level laws to go after women and go after healthcare providers there in Maricopa County. So that's a big one.
I agree with you. I think Gunnigal, that's her race to lose, because if it is Rachel Mitchell or one of the other lunatics running for that nomination, she definitely has the independent vote. She has the suburbs. I mean, this is the worst year for Republicans to overturn Roe v. Wade. That was a gift. That was a gift for the Democrats.
Yeah, the Republicans' position is very unpopular. Over 60% of Arizonans and Americans in general support a woman's right to choose and have abortion available, at least in most circumstances.
Well, do you want to be the Republican candidate that says, are you okay with a 10-year-old having to get not getting an abortion because she was raped? Are you okay with getting that question time in, time out?
Another thing we need to keep our eye on is election workers and election polls. Here in Pima County, the county Republican Party has announced that they've got 700 people lined up to go out and disrupt the vote centers and disrupt balloting places. They even have a name for it. They call them Trident teams. And they've been trained by the National Republican Party, and they're just licking their chops to see if they can't, mess up voting in Arizona by force.
This is as a result of that bill that the legislature heard a few times. I think Kelly Townsend was the sponsor a few years ago. I don't know who the current sponsor was, but that was where anybody can challenge, right? The Republicans love the anybody can challenge type of bills where you would have people saying, "Whoa, I don't think you're a voter, and let me see your driver's license or whatever." And that's just awful. I mean, that sort of intimidation at the polls on top of all the other laws that they've passed. I feel bad for the county recorders because it's falling in their laps, all these changes they make to sort it all out and have a secure and safe election where everybody who casts a ballot is counted. They're really putting up so many barriers to having a safe and fair election like we did in 2020. They really want to break the system. They don't want to just break the school system. They want to break the election system for some reason. I don't get it. I don't understand what their end game is.
The Republicans know that if there's a big turnout, the Republicans will lose. They're very well aware that if Arizonans vote, and the more people who do vote, this is all very good for the Democrats. The Republicans have been, in solidarity about trying to restrict the right to vote. They even created this a new requirement that in federal elections you have to re-register and show ID. This is designed to keep old people and Democrats and
Native Americans on the reservation too.
College students are going to get tripped up on some of this stuff too because they move a lot. So do you guys have any parting comments? We'll start with Larry because we started with him in his intro.
Well, guys, I think the defining issue of this election is going to be the Republicans' effort to kill public education. Far and away, most of the students in Arizona go to public schools, and the Republican legislature and governor have created just a blank giveaway. They're going to give people debit cards that they can use on private schools, and it's a debit card. And, this is the most far-reaching school privatization plan in the country. The Republicans are hoping that this will be a national example to destroy public education. And really the most obnoxious part of it is we're now, these vouchers go to kids who go to religious school. We have a separation in church and state in America, and they just completely breached it. It's like, oh, fine, you're a religious school, here's $7,000. Let's just support your religion.
David, you want to make a few final comments?
Sure, thank you, Pamela. I think it comes down to what do voters want. Do they want a candidate that believes in choice? Do they want a candidate that believes in science? Do they want a candidate that believes in lifting people up? Do they want a candidate that believes in law and order? Do they want a candidate that believes in moving the state forward? If you want a candidate that's all that, you vote for the Democrats, because the Republicans, time and time again, have proven they don't support any of that. If the Democrats, deliver that type of message, it's their race to lose up and down the ballot.
I agree. Mike?
Yeah, thanks, Graham. Yeah, I agree with all those sentiments, but I think one of the things to keep in mind is the Republican Party is kind of running off the rails. I mean, the whole experience with Trump and the insurrection and the denial of the 2020 election has taken them off into cloud cuckoo land. I mean, they've fallen down this hole of conspiracy theories and lies and misinformation that they're all clamoring to see who can be the biggest liar to get Trump's approval, and voters are just not buying it. They're fed up. They're done. They don't want to hear the lies and the bullshit. Sorry for the French, anymore. They want to hear about how people are going to address global warming, how they're going to keep Arizona's economy vibrant and growing in the face of aridification of our area and the lack of water. They want to hear about how to educate their children and keep health care for their families, and how to have good jobs and a strong economy. And the Democrats are talking about those issues. Republicans absolutely are not. They could not care less about any of that stuff. And so I think we're going to see a complete train wreck for the GOP, and deservedly so, because they've taken their eyes off the ball and become just a cult worshiping one orange monstrosity.
I have a tendency to agree with you. I was elected to office, the same night as Donald Trump in 2016, which was a real shocker for me. And I saw the Republicans in the legislature going from being sort of embarrassed about him at the beginning to so many of them just jumping right on board. In 2020, Republican House members who were elected were much more radical than the people that they replaced. And so I am really hoping that, like I said earlier, we know that the legislature is going to change because there's so many moving parts to the primary election and to the November election, that I hope we have some changes for the better in the legislature. And I am rooting for those statewide candidates, and of course for Kirsten Engel and Mark Kelly, to go to Congress, because we need some reason in Congress and we need some reason in the legislature. And especially in the legislature, we did not have that in 2021 and 2022. It was pretty nuts, and a lot of it was because of that war in the Republican Party. I don't know. We'll see. And so I really appreciate your comments on the primary. And in a week or so, we'll see how that shakes out. And so thanks so much for being on my podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in to A View from the Left Side today. If you enjoyed the show, please consider liking this podcast on social media and becoming a subscriber. This is Representative Pam Powers Hanley signing off. Until next time, please take care of yourself, stay healthy, and stay vigilant.